Good evening, councillors, management and members of the public. I declare this meeting open at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 30th of June 2026. I welcome all of those attending tonight's meeting, both in person and virtually. Good to see you, Councillor Owen Guest, online, and I understand that Councillor Gladys Liu will also be endeavouring to join us online as well. We are meeting on the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. This meeting is being streamed live, and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the City of Melbourne's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. We move on to agenda item 2, which is the disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest as defined in the Local Government Act in relation to a matter to be considered by Council, please disclose the type and nature of interest prior to consideration of the item. Moving on to agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the open minutes of Council meeting number 18, held on Tuesday, the 26th of May, 2026. Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. I declare that carried unanimously, noting Councillor Guest's vote on the screen as well. We move on to agenda item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any matters from those minutes that anybody wants to call out? No. In that case, we move on to items of correspondence and submissions. The following submissions have been received in accordance with the Council's governance rules. In relation to agenda item 7.1, notice of motion, Lord Mayor Rees returning the Burke and Wills Memorial to our city, we have an item of correspondence from Chris Thrum. Does any councillor... we did receive other correspondence on that item that I'm aware of, but I can't see it noted here. We might make reference to that when we get to debate later on. Perhaps it wasn't submitted in the through the normal way. We move on to agenda item 5, or actually further extension of agenda item 4, status of confidential items. Does any councillor wish to discuss the confidential status of any of the confidential items listed in the public agenda? Councillor Guest, I can see you moving your hand there.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, technologically challenged. I think in particular 14.2, could I please have an explanation as to why that needs to be in confidential status?
Yes, you may. I may turn to our Head of Governance, David Thompson. According to my notes, that refers to the... were you referring to the Queen Victoria Market,
yep.
Pty Ltd
yes.
business plan? Yep.
Yes.
So that is listed for consideration in confidential. David, did you wish to speak to that?
Through you, Lord Mayor, my recollection is why this particular item is being listed for confidential business is it contains information that may disadvantage... it contains commercial sensitive information with regard to financial reports and the business plans of the Queen Victoria market, which may potentially cause them to be prejudiced if the premature disclosure of that information is revealed prior to council in considering that particular item.
Look, thank you for the explanation, but more to talk about on return. I've read through it, and I think there are items within that in fact, I think the public would like to know. So I just want to put that on the record. I'm sceptical of any damage would occur, and I do think there are items within that are material and of relevance to the public.
All right, thank you for that, Owen, and noted.
Thank you.
We move on to agenda item 5, reports from committee. There are no reports from committee. We move on to agenda item 6, reports from management. There are 3 reports from management. The first of those is notice of native title determination application. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? I'm taking that as a no. I will therefore request that a motion that has been prepared by management be put on the screen, and let's just check that is there, the Perry James one. That is it. I'm happy.
Should it be a party? Party, not part.
Yes, can we please have that amended? Good pickup from our eagle-eyed councillors in the front row. Become a party, yes. Okay. All right, I'm happy to move that motion, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll now speak to this item. The application has been lodged by Perry James Wandin and others on behalf of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and covers approximately 10,424 square kilometres across Melbourne, covering some 36 councils. It applies to Crown land only and excludes freehold land and public works. Under the Native Title Act 1993, Council has been invited to join the federal court proceedings. This provides the opportunity to protect Council's legal interest and participate in any determination affecting land under our management. The application covers all Crown land within the municipality, where Council acts as a committee of management for a significant number of assets, including major parks, gardens and reserves. Preliminary analysis by our team has identified extensive public open space holdings that could be impacted, with further detailed mapping required. So joining the proceedings would ensure that Council has a seat at the table, and I do want to stress that in voting for this and seeking that seat at the table, we do this in good faith. It allows us to understand the claim, assess implications and influence any agreement or determination. It also supports clarity on how native title rights may coexist with public infrastructure and our service delivery responsibilities. This will ensure Council remains informed, protects its land management responsibility and constructively engages in a process that is significant for traditional owners and the broader community. That is why I am supporting this motion, moving this motion. I hope other councillors will support it as well. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd certainly echo those remarks about the appropriate course of conduct being Council being joined as a party to this proceeding, so it has the opportunity to be heard. Of course, this type of proceeding, although not uncommon in other states, is relatively untested in Victoria, in particular in this context. And while it is clear that we will be some years away from a final determination, it would be remiss of this Council to miss the opportunity to be a party to those proceedings. Of course, there will be several opportunities along the way for Council to actually form its position in respect of these proceedings. but that will all be moot if we are not to avail ourselves of the opportunity to be joined at this time. I do also note that given the very large scale of the land holding, as you've referred to, Lord Mayor, some 10,424 square kilometres, this does not only affect the City of Melbourne but indeed 35 other councils, and so we will watch with interest as to the position they take and the approach they take should they decide to also be joined to this proceeding.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Philip Leilou.
I think it's just more question. I don't know who to address to. Would be to
David Thompson.
David, okay. David, so in terms of being a party to this litigation and everything, the officers would be using the City of Melbourne's policy and stance on native title claims, and also because as part of the RAP, and also what was the other one? I can't remember. It's a City of Melbourne position that I think we support. The wording goes something along the lines of we support the native title claims and everything. So can I confirm that if we were to party of that and our officers are to have that negotiation and discussion, that we will be using a City of Melbourne's current stance, using the RAP and the others, or would it be completely separate policy and stance?
Thank you, Councillor Leilou, for the question. Through you, Lord Mayor. Any critical decision that comes up with regard to the native title application will come before the councillors to make determination. Council officers will not be using the instrument of delegation that's available to make any decision on this particular matter. All key decisions will go through the council chamber.
You just follow up and clarify so that we won't be using even our current policy and stance.
The current policy will provide the framework, and as the information comes to light, it'll be assessed against the current policy position of the council. So councillors will have all the necessary information to make an informed decision on any matter that comes out of this particular native title application.
Right, so it'll be assessed against current policy and framework, but ultimately they won't be using the current stance to have an argument or to present to the courts and everything.
The council adopted position would be the framework upon which the officer's advice or guidance to councillors would be based upon.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? No? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 6.2, Council Endorsement of Strategic Internal Audit Plan FY27 to FY29. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No. In that case, I call on, well, let me first request that the motion be put up on the screen there. Yep, no errors there. I'm looking for a councillor to move this motion. Thank you, Councillor Owen Guest. And looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor David Griffiths. Back to you, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Excuse me, but I applaud management's recommendation here. Obviously, the 3 years of audit processes are very, very important to the City of Melbourne to ensure that everything that we do is done in the most efficient and appropriate way possible. The only caveat I would have on this is that it's outcomes that are truly important, not policy documents. And I'm waiting on the particular review that's underway by this organisation, which is into transparency, and I think that'll provide a magnificent test case as to this overall 3-year plan. So when we see the transparency review and what outcomes it leads to, I think we'll have a great understanding and idea of how successful this 3-year plan is about to be, will be. So I do recommend this motion with the caveat that we will push to improve it as time goes on, should the need arise.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guest. Over to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm obviously very happy to be seconding this motion, which sets down the framework for the Audit and Risk Committee's work, particularly in the coming year, but in the years after that as well, noting that it's covering off on a number of very important areas, particularly around the IT resilience and artificial intelligence frameworks that the Council operates within, which are obviously important and very timely, and also that there's a number of matters to do with assets management, to do with docklands and property leasing. And again, I think that that's timely and good. And just rounding out the work on the psychosocial risk management, which is a very important area for us to be considering. A number of discussions that we've been having as councillors recently have focused on the need to get management of that right, which is good for us as an organisation and also important from the point of view of all of the workers within council. For those reasons, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I'll also add to the submissions of Councillor Guest and Councillor Griffiths by thanking them and Councillor Philip Leilou and others of you who serve on the Audit and Risk Committee. It is indeed one of the most important functions that we perform as councillors and as a leadership team at the City of Melbourne. Like you, Councillor Griffiths, I do agree that this work program looks strong and well focused. In year one, the program targets key areas of organisational risk and performance, in particular financial and budget management, IT resilience, as you identified, and asset handover in docklands. Planning reform, readiness, workplace safety, and emerging areas like artificial intelligence and governance. And look, across the full 3-year horizon, the plan aligns directly with Council's strategic risk profile, which includes things like cyber security, financial sustainability, infrastructure delivery, integrity, and service performance. So put that all together, it's a very full program going forward for the Audit and Risk Committee, as you would expect it to be, as the ratepayers of Melbourne would expect it to be, and all who use and rely on our services here in the city. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? No? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. The next agenda item is 6.3, Workers' Compensation Premium Payment 2026-2027. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No. In that case, I will request that a motion be put on the screen. That is the one. Looking for a mover of this motion. Thank you, Councillor Owen Guest. I will second. Back to you, Councillor Guest.
Thank you again, Lord Mayor. This is a relatively simple motion, I hope. The most notable aspect of it, of course, is the significant increase in our insurance premium when it comes to work cover and elsewhere. Two key factors that I think go into the premium here. One is the legislated increases, which we can't do anything about. And the other is, of course, how many people we employ at the City of Melbourne, which is a function of how many activities that we take on, and that is under our domain. Something that we should think about. With that said, I'm happy to put forward this motion. Clearly, we need the work cover premium, and it is expensive. That has to be noted, but it also has to be done to stop the expense rising even further.
Thank you for that, Councillor Guest. Look, I also support the motion that is before us. And I do note that this item does require approval of council and as required under Victorian law. The headline figure is an indicative premium of 4.5 million with a 5% early payment discount, reducing this to approximately 4.22 million. That's why this is before us this evening, and that's why we intend to make the payment before the 10th of August. It is notable that 10 years ago, our work cover premium was about $1 million. Now it's $4.2 million. It's gone up fourfold over the course of a decade. That sort of increase is just simply not sustainable. And so I do hope to see all measures being taken to ensure that our premiums do remain at a reasonable and realistic level for us here at the city. I do understand that the increase reflects broader system pressures. WorkSafe Victoria is responding to rising claim volumes, more complex injuries and growing long-term liabilities across the state. These increases are being applied uniformly and not something that Council can negotiate. So that is a challenge for us here at the city. But with all of that said and done, I will be supporting this motion before us this evening. Would any other councillors like to submit on this item, speak to this item? No. Councillor Philip Leilou.
So can I ask a question? So in terms of the cover, if somebody's working from home on council business, would that be covered as part of it?
Take that question. Dominic, okay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The short answer is yes, because it's a workplace, considered a workplace.
And if someone would say they are working on council, but then ultimately, let's just say but they went to a cafe or something like that to have a meeting, whatever, and was injured and slash everything, would that be considered covered?
I'd probably have to take that one on notice because it's a bit more complicated in terms of other activities.
Yeah, it'll be good, I think, given that there is the work from home initiative that's going to be put in place. I'm just keen to understand a bit more on what is our work cover insurance, especially from a work from home perspective, and just say what is covered and what is not. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Done.
All right, and are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this item? No, in that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. This concludes the reports from management. We now move on to general business, agenda item 7. There are 2 items of general business. The first of those, 7.1, notice of motion. Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees returning the Burke and Wills Memorial to our city. Can I please have that motion appear on the screen, which I am happy to move? Do I have a seconder?
Lord Mayor, and I also have a question of management, which I'm happy to ask at whichever time it's convenient for you.
So why don't we take it as seconded? Do you want to ask your question now?
Yes, if
DLM?
I may.
Okay.
I believe this is either for Karen or perhaps Rick. Obviously, the most recent home of Burke and Wills has been City Square, which has obviously had significant changes to it since the statue was located there. Appreciating there is now difficulty with it returning to its original corner because of the canopy. Is there any reason why it could not be, for example, on another corner of City Square, such as Flinders Lane and Swanston Street?
I might ask our Acting General Manager, Infrastructure and Amenity, to provide a response.
Thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor. If I start with why it's not going into the location it's in now, so back in...
Can I just check, Karen, before you go on, that we're getting that audio coming through, not just in the room, but as part of our webcast?
Okay, try that again. Working?
Got it? come over to the councillor row. Karen Miller, thank you very much.
I'm acting in all sorts of things today. Okay, thank you through you, Lord Mayor. So back in 2024, a decision was taken for the statue to be relocated to Exhibition Street Reserve based on a number of factors. It was determined that due to the prominence of the new station canopy, it was not appropriate to return the station to its previous position. In particular, it wasn't an appropriate location for a statue of this size and scale. It's also considered at the time the expected future use of the station and the increase in pedestrians in the vicinity, which we are definitely experiencing at the moment. Consideration was also given to the rail infrastructure within the square that creates challenges for locating the statue. It would also cause challenges for the operations of the square for events and utilising it as a square. And it was for those reasons that other locations around the city were explored for a location. And Exhibition Street Reserve was selected after discussions with the Royal Society of Victoria. There's a strong connection to the Royal Society of Victoria and the Burke and Wills statue. People may not realise this, but the Royal Society of Victoria organised, funded and managed what was then known as the Victorian Exploring Exhibition, which was actually led by Robert O'Hara Burke and William John Wills across the Australian continent to the Gulf of Carpentaria. The pair met for the first time at the RSV building, which is actually opposite Exhibition Street Reserve, and they also lay in state in that building prior to their state funeral at St Paul's. Ideally, the statue would have been in the grounds of that building, but unfortunately that hasn't been able to be made possible. And so the next best location was determined across the street. And that keeps then the link with the history of the achievement of the two explorers. In answer to the DLM's question, we returned the Beyond the Ocean of Existence sculpture at the moment to that corner, and we could explore whether or not the statue could fit in that location. It is a significantly larger statue than the sculpture that's there now, but it's certainly something that we could explore if that's what Council would wish us to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Philip Leilou.
Thank you. And I've also got a question. So I note that in the new city square, we have, when the design was actually done and everything, we considered all kinds of, things put in there. Why didn't we consider putting the Burke and Wills in the city square? But we included, I can't remember what was the three things that we had, the ceremonial marker, and then what was the other couple of things that we had in the city square? So why is it that the ceremonial square was considered, but then the Burke and Wills was not considered putting in the city square?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I might respond to that. There were several. It was considered as part of the design process, and it was seen, given the size and scale of the sculpture and the use of the square, that it wouldn't be appropriate in that location. So it was considered, and for the outline that Karen provided earlier, it was considered more appropriate within the Exhibition Street Reserve.
Thanks, Rick. Just follow up. Can you give me an idea of when that was given? Because I think when we were talking about City Square, there was never this mention of the Burke and Wills was considered. All that was considered that they told us was the ceremonial marker and the others, but there was never, because I think we asked about the point about having the Burke and Wills there, but it was never brought up. So can I just get confirmation why management did not bring that up?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I can answer that question. It was in a paper on the 30th of April 2024 when a number of confidential items were discussed in relation to the design of the square.
All right. Councillor Leilou, do you have any further questions? Councillor Owen Guest, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think it's following on from this. I know we received some correspondence on this item, so can I ask the question to begin with, has it previously been agreed, I think in conjunction with the Department of Transport and Planning, that we would return the memorial to the city square?
Through you, Lord Mayor, no, it hasn't. We went through the design process and updated councillors in the meeting outlined in 2024. And as part of the outline of that design, the proposal was not to relocate Burke and Wills within City Square.
Okay, but that's 2024. Were there any previous arrangements?
I'm not aware of any previous arrangements, although Karen might be able to provide a further update.
Back on. Through you, Lord Mayor, I believe that as part of the original scoping of the project, there was funding made available for the return of the sculpture to City Square with DTP.
Yes, okay. So then a follow-up question. You suggested plans have changed. Were these plans made public? I think I heard the words confidential used, and if they weren't made public, why not?
As part of the design process with Metro Rail and the state, we went through a fairly rigorous design outcome. It was presented to council as part of the process, which was confidential at the time. I'd have to go back and take that specific question on notice as to why it was confidential at the time.
Yeah. It's concerning, especially when I triangulate that being around the same time that Captain's Cottage was actively being not returned, or the statue, I should say, was not being returned. And we've seen at least certain instances here. Yeah, this is a concerning way of going about this in a process sense.
All right. Is that a question, Owen?
No, that's the final comment. Thank you. I think I've got the answer.
So we'll move on to debate now, and you're very welcome to make these points as part of debate if you so wish. All right, I will now speak to this item as the mover. So Robert O'Hara Burke, William John Wills, two of the most famous names in our city's history. The City of Melbourne is committed to the return of Burke and Wills Memorial in a prominent and publicly accessible civic location after its removal from the City Square for Metro Tunnel works. The Burke and Wills Monument is the oldest and, I would argue, most famous piece of public art in Melbourne, and the City of Melbourne has owned and managed it since 1865. Burke and Wills were heroes of Melbourne in the 1860s, and they remain an important part of our city's history and story to this day. The Burke and Wills statue has found a home in 5 different locations across Melbourne since 1865. It used to once be located on the corner of, actually not in the corner, in the middle of the intersection of Russell Street and Collins Street. It was like a roundabout out there in the middle of the intersection. It was up on Spring Street there for many decades as well, where the Tianjin Gardens now are. It had to be relocated that time because of the construction of the City Loop and the new station portal for the Parliament Station was going in there. That resulted in it being moved to another corner of the city, then located to City Square, and now, if this motion is supported this evening, it will be moving to a new location again, Exhibition Street Reserve there in the Hoddle grid. I must say that in my opinion, this new location for Burke and Wills is probably the best we have found yet. It's a high-profile gateway location to the city there in the Hoddle grid. It is also located in a very historic precinct for Melbourne. You've got the Royal Exhibition building there, and of course the Royal Society of Victoria's headquarters. The Royal Society of Victoria play a very important role in the Burke and Wills story because the Royal Society were indeed the sponsors of Burke and Wills' mission into the interior, in fact their mission to cross Australia. And as we have heard, Burke and Wills lay in state at the Royal Society building prior to their funerals. Indeed, some 200,000 people turned up to view Burke and Wills in state, almost half the population of Melbourne at the time. Such was the remarkable extent to which they captured public imagination with their endeavours. I'm pleased to say that I have been in frequent dialogue and consultation with the Royal Society ahead of this motion coming to us this evening. And I do want to thank the Chair of the Royal Society, Rob Gell, for his really constructive engagement with us. And also Ted Baillieu, former Premier of Victoria, now active with the Royal Society, who's also been a source of good advice to us. And I can inform councillors that the Royal Society are very happy with Exhibition Reserve as a location for Burke and Wills Monument. And as we have heard from officers this evening, the Exhibition Street Reserve is a much easier location than the Royal Society Reserve. And I actually think it's a better location, both physicality, location, part of the precinct, high profile location. I think it will work very, very well. Indeed, this debate about the Burke and Wills statue has solicited many responses across our community, and I do want to acknowledge that many people have said how important it is that we recognise the crucial role of the Yandyarawunda people, whose knowledge and generosity sustained the expedition and indeed kept John King alive when all others on that expedition had perished. And it is only because of the generosity and knowledge of the Yandyarawunda people that we actually know the story of Burke and Wills. And so I am pleased to report that as part of this motion we'll be voting on this evening, and with us relocating the monument, it will also include contextual information which will provide a fuller telling and a more honest story that reflects both European exploration and Indigenous knowledge. I will also point out that we have received correspondence from Howard Brant Fuller from Eastgate North Newbold in East Yorkshire. Howard is I think I'll get this right, the great-great-great-great-grandson of John King. And it's fair to say that the King family and the Fullers remain unhappy to this day that John King's heroic contribution to the Burke and Wills expedition has not been fully accounted for in the history books. They feel that John King's contribution to the expedition is often diminished, and I quote, particularly the valuable assistance he gave in keeping Robert O'Hara Burke and William Wills alive towards the end of that epic journey, not to mention his total loyalty and devotion to them, and his assistance was invaluable in relaying all the facts after his recovery, thanks to the help of the Yandyarawunda people. History cannot be undone, but it really is about time that John King's name and likeness should also be displayed with that of Burke and Wills. So this will be the subject for further consideration by the City of Melbourne, but in providing context and information about the Burke and Wills expedition, I do hope that John King's role in it all can be properly recognised as well. So, by placing the memorial back in the heart of the city, we're ensuring future generations can engage with this legacy, its ambition, its lessons and its place in shaping who we are. So on that note, I do hope that councillors will support the motion before us this evening. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's worth noting that this motion finally confirms the City of Melbourne's commitment to return Burke and Wills to a prominent and publicly accessible location. And of course, the statue has had many, many homes in this state, but this is perhaps one that tells the story of the lives and the role that Burke and Wills played in Victoria, even after their deaths, best. A storytelling that has not really been achieved in any other location in which the statue has previously been. Of course, this is a location that is the gateway to our city. We know, in addition to the very many visitors, both to the Royal Society, Carlton Gardens and the exhibition building, there are so many people who pass this location every day. And obviously a statue of this size and significance will now be appreciated by so many in a way that it would not in so many of the other locations previously held. This motion, of course, does note that work needs to be done to assess the viability of Exhibition Street Reserve and affirms that commitment, if that site does not prove appropriate, to identify another prominent site, all of which is a way of saying that this council certainly is committed to making sure that this is a statue that is both accessible, prominent and seen by as many Melburnians as possible as part of our commitment to telling the history of this city and this state.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would any other councillor like to speak to this on? Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to be very brief. I will be supporting this motion today, but my only point in here, the question is why this took so long. So when it comes back in August, if we could speed this process, because since I got in council, I got the constituents asking what's going on. So, and I think the committee with this new council, we're getting things done. And if you can speed up this process, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? No, in that case, I'll put... Oh, Councillor Guest, over to you.
Just quickly, I'll reiterate, I'm not inundated with support for the move of this the statue. So I just thought that needs to be said. It's obviously something that is, will divide opinion, and given... If not now, I am, encouraged, if you like, by your words. You clearly have a zeal for Burke and Wills, so I'm not suggesting you don't think these statues shouldn't be somewhere prominent, but given the council's sort of past of displaying an anti-colonial sentiment, I have to take things with a grain of salt. So, I'm being asked to put forward that it should remain where it was, and so I will do that. But yeah, obviously, the real outcome is we want these to be displayed properly and somewhere where all can see and see the history. And I also share your sentiments, Nick, Lord Mayor, about the various people. There's a lot of history there, and it's worth remembering. So I just say there are counter views here, and I just thought I'd put that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Would any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Philip Leilu.
I probably wasn't, but since we're letting it out, and look, I thank you to the Lord Mayor for moving this. I do think, for me, the statues, whether or not, it's history is history, and I think we need to just understand the process, and we just need to kind of respect it. I was here when they talked about, the metro tunnel and taking over our space and returning it back, and it was made very clear that the statue was going back in there. The process at which it's taken, and then also the arguments around city squares and everything, and also given the fact that that we have many of our statues that's damaged, but then it's taken so long to fix. I mean, the fact that we have to put up NOMs, notice of motions, to either reinstall statues or fix statues, makes me ask really questions of what is it that is here that is hindering that process. And I do hope that management will have a good look at that. I don't think we should be putting up notice of motions on every single thing, but if it needs to, we will do it, right? We will just keep on putting up notice of motion. It's more to do with the process, right? It's more to the fact that history is history, regardless of how you want to call it and everything. I don't have a particular view, but what I don't like is the fact that there is no transparency, and there's also a potential view of, just deciding whether or not we like it or not, to either have it or not. And so if it means the fact that we have to keep on going through notice of motions to reinstall every single one of them or to fix every single statue, then so be it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Philip Lay-Lu.
Has Councillor Dr Guest left the meeting?
I can still see, it looks like he's on the phone. There we go, the video's back. All right, thank you.
Sorry, battery issues.
Anything further to add, Councillor Ball? No? Okay. All right, any other speakers to this motion? As mover, I'll just exercise a right of reply and say we do expect that this statue, monument should be reinstated by the end of the year or thereabouts. And so very much looking forward to seeing that occur. I'll now put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay. So Councillor Rees, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Scott, Deputy Lord Mayor Campbell, Councillor Louis, Councillor Camillo, Councillor Lay-Lu, Councillor Griffiths. All those against? Any councillors abstaining? Councillor Guest, I've got you as abstaining. Okay, that motion has passed. We move on, as we always do, to agenda item 7.2, notice of motion. Lord Mayor Rees, funding support. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No? Okay. In that case, we will move straight to the motion. I'm going to exercise my discretion as Lord Mayor and ask for the motion to be split. And so can we please have the motion put up there, please? And as you've been advised, if we could please have all items except for Melbourne Day put in the first motion and then have Melbourne Day put individually in the second motion, please. Yep, that will do it. So I'm now moving motion 1. I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Just a question, Lord Mayor, if I may,
yes,
in relation to the split, does that mean we'll be debating in 2 parts or just voting in 2 parts?
We'll debate it in 2 parts. Yep. All right, so moving motion 1. This is exercise of the Councillor Discretionary Fund. It's a motion which is all about investing in community events and organisations that deliver for our community here in Melbourne. We're proposing to provide support to 7 programs totalling $118,000. I wish to thank councillors for their efforts in bringing this list together. I'm particularly pleased to see that this motion provides support for the Special Olympics National Games. This will be a major inclusive sporting event for Melbourne, which will promote participation, visibility and community connection for people with a disability, and pleased to see that we will have events being held here in Parkville. I'm also particularly pleased to see support there for Our Place, who deliver wonderful community services there in Carlton, and the Carlton basketball program, getting more kids active in our community, particularly that community in that corner of our city, I think is a truly wonderful thing. I do hope this motion will meet with the support of councillors. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would certainly echo those sentiments. We know that our community groups deliver some of the most impactful programs in our municipality, and particularly looking at these funding items, the Melbourne Victory Football Club, the Carlton R Place program, they are particularly timely in circumstances where Roy Morgan's latest Young Australian survey finds even our most popular sports are being played by fewer young people aged 6 to 13 than a decade ago. That is, fewer and fewer young people are participating in any sport. The level of physical activity has significantly declined, and we know that there are long-term life consequences for not having the requisite levels of physical activity, not having the opportunity to participate in sport, to learn those vital skills, not just of sporting skills, but of teamwork and the opportunity to connect with other people. So, to my mind, this is much needed support for very, very desperately needed programs, and I'm very happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Are there any other speakers to this motion? No, in that case, I'll put the Councillor Olivia Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to note that in 2013, this council set some transparent good practice guidelines for the spending of this discretionary fund, and that those guidelines remain in place today. They were that requests for funding ought to be made and initiated by the potential recipient, and I'm not aware that all of these proposals are responses to requests from any external organisations. A second guideline is that such requests ought to be received at least 90 days prior to any event in question that is to be funded. And in this case, we see that the Latin celebration and Melbourne Day are less than 90 days away. And thirdly, that funding should not be given to any organisations, events or programs that are eligible for other existing funding streams of this council. Officers have advised us that none of these proposals in this motion meets all of those criteria. It's nonetheless within the power of this council to make these grants in spite of its own prior guidelines. But we should question why we would wish to flout these sensible, transparent and reasonable guidelines and overthrow established practice of more than a decade. My concerns are for fairness and transparency. Why these organisations and not others? What about the organisations that have gone to the trouble of submitting a grant application? Indeed, one of these recipients has done so and, I'm told, been rejected by the grants application process. So I see no argument evident tonight as to why that decision should be overturned. I also reject the impulse to rush to spend this money before the annual fund expires today, as if we would otherwise lose that money, which is, of course, nonsense. This discretionary fund comes from our budget, and any unspent funds would go back into our budget. A rush to spend funds on the flimsiest of untested assertions and against officer advice is not responsible governance. Having said that, I want to emphasise I don't wish to besmirch in any way any of these organisations considered here tonight, some of which may not have initiated and put themselves on the agenda. Indeed, some of them I've never even heard of before. And I'm willing to take my colleagues' proposals in good faith and support these 6 projects on this occasion. But I want to urge that in future we do stick to transparent good practice, or else abolish the discretionary fund.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Would any other councillors? Councillor Philip Leilou.
Thank you. I was going to speak, but given the impassionate speech by Councillor Ball, I thought I should also add my thing. I think transparency is definitely one that we need to follow, and discretionary fund is set out purely of the fact that there are some times where management advice, we believe, at the end of the day, we work for the people of Melbourne, not for the management. And we, sometimes when community groups come to us with certain group requests, we need to take that good faith. And we have done so in this moment. I'm happy to put forward, I'm the person who wants to support more Melbourne Day, because City of Melbourne have supported Melbourne Day previously, but yet in many years have come forward, we have refused to celebrate our own day, which is quite disheartening. My understanding from speaking with the Melbourne Day Committee, even a simple request is promoting on what's on Melbourne, what's actually happening on August 30 down at Enterprise Park was actually rejected by our own media team to not put on there. And so it's pretty saddening to hear that City of Melbourne does not even want to celebrate our own day, and yet we give money and funding towards other celebration of day, which I think is appropriate, right? If we want to celebrate Indian Day, if we want to celebrate we're wearing pink shirt day, great. But the fact that we don't actually even want to support our own, the day of Melbourne, which was founded, I think it's a bit ridiculous. And so that's why where the discretionary funds is come through. I do plan to put up a notice of motion going through this in the coming weeks anyway, to change our position to that we do not only support Melbourne Day, but also on whether or not where our position is on Australia Day as well. But I think supporting discretionary funding is needed, so that where there is particular groups, community groups, are not able to get through the bureaucracy, the regulations, and also the hurdles sometimes that is of council, we have power and our judgment, and at the end of the day, I would say all of us have been, elected based on a couple of thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, and so we work for them. And so if we have a good judgment on causes and issues that we think is appropriate, I do think that this is something that we should put forward. And so, I'm not too sure about $10,000 for Melbourne Day when we're giving, $100,000 to Australian Open and all the other ones. I think it's not appropriate. But then again, this is small steps, and it's become small steps. There are great bigger things. And so I do note that it's been separated out rather than being part of it. That's fine. That's within the people's movers' choice, and also other people on that. But I do think keeping discretionary funds for these particular issues is quite important.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Leilu. Councillor Owen Guest.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I'll try and keep it brief, but I agree wholeheartedly with the Deputy Lord Mayor's stance that sport for young people is very important and has many beneficial effects. With that said, some of the comments of Councillor Ball in particular have concerned me, so I have two questions. One, can it be confirmed or otherwise that management have not recommended these allocations? And my second question is, does anyone have any associations, either past or present, with any of these bodies that we're recommending funds for?
All right, thank you, Councillor Guest. Rick, we might come to you as our acting CEO on that item. Rick Kwasek.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the item has gone through to management for comment, and generally this is a matter for council to determine as part of the discretionary fund, but there was no objection to the proposals put forward.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Raphael Camillo.
We were told by officers that none of them met the eligibility criteria. That was the advice of officers. I have double and triple checked, and that has been confirmed. We've received that in writing.
Would any other officer like to respond?
Through you, Lord Mayor, just to
Thank you, Kirsty
add
Pearce.
some assistance. This notice of motion was put forward by councillors as part of the process in developing the notice of motion. It was referred to officers for comment. Officers did provide advice relating to the fund, and you're correct, Councillor Ball. For a number of these items, it was determined that they either didn't meet the timeline of those policy guidelines, or they may have been eligible for other grants. But as you mentioned before as well, notwithstanding those guidelines, Council can pass a resolution this evening.
Thank you for that clarification, Kirsty. Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Just a commentary, Lord Mayor, is in regards to we bring to the public to see is in there, and we're voting today. So sometimes I think this has more transparency than vote in confidential items, okay? And then we just tell to the public what we decide in a confidential meeting. So I think it has two ways. Okay, I think it's just a different interpretation to see. So you have rules and regulations from that, but at least in here, the public, you can see where is the money is going, who is voting, and has it. I just want to put it out there to the public.
All right. Are there any other speakers to this motion? In that case, I'll put the... Oh, Councillor Ball. But
I just note that Councillor Guest asked a particular question that was not answered.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Please, do you want to repeat your question, Councillor Guest?
It was just... Thank you. Just a question for all of us. Does anyone have any associations with these bodies, either past, or in the past or now? Just for transparency's sake. If the answer is no, that's fine.
What's the relevance of that question? I think the question should be: does anybody have a connection with any of these organisations which would give rise to a conflict under our governance rules? Is that your question?
No, my question was what I asked.
Well, would you want us to ask each councillor individually of that question, Councillor Guest?
If anybody feels the need to say something, they can. That's all. There's nothing difficult about this.
All right. Does any councillors wish to respond to Councillor Guest's question? No. In that case, we'll move on. Councillor Ball, did you have a question? Okay. Councillor Andrew Rouse.
Just a quick question, and perhaps best directed at the Director of Governance, that in relation to Governance Rules 28 and 29, we're at the Chair's discretion in relation to debating twice and voting twice, as opposed to voting twice, debating once.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question. If, as I understand it, the motion is being split, so we're dealing with one motion which currently appears on the screen at the motion, so the rules of debate apply, and there's the opportunity for councillors to vote on that particular item. And then once this item is determined, we move to the second motion, and again, the rules of debate apply and councillors vote on that particular item.
All right.
So we are having a second debate.
Yes, there will be a second debate on the second motion that comes up.
That's, yeah, that was someone's discretion on that point. That's, I thought, was the clearest, best way to do it. All right, if there's no further submitters on this item, put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All right, Lord Mayor Rees, Councillor Ball, Councillor Scott, Deputy Lord Mayor Campbell, Councillor Louis, Councillor Camilla, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Guest, can I just confirm you are voting in the affirmative? Yes, you are. Okay. All those against? Any councillors abstaining? Councillor Rouse, I have you down as abstaining. All right, that motion has passed. We now move to the next motion on Australia Day, looking for a mover for this. I'm happy to... Now, we're now moving to the second motion in relation to a request, approval of funding of $10,000 to Melbourne Day Committee for support for community events related to Melbourne Day. I'm moving that motion. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm happy to speak to this item and say Melbourne is the city that gave the world Vegemite, AFL rules, Australian rules football, and the 8-hour day. It's a day, Melbourne Day is an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments and achievements of this city, and this small amount of funds will assist the Melbourne Day Committee to do just that. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Nothing further to add, Lord Mayor.
All right. Did anybody else want to speak to this item? Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I appreciate you separating this clause out from the other grants because I cannot support it. So I'm very grateful to be able to vote against this portion because this council and the great majority of our citizens do not support celebrating the 26th of January because it is the day that invasion of this continent and the dispossession of our sovereign First Nations commenced. Thus, it is a day of mourning and not one that can ever unite Australians as a national day. And I have no doubt that for essentially the same reasons, the great majority of our citizens would not support celebrating so-called Melbourne Day if they had ever heard of it. Why celebrate the last 200 years of white history and not the people who lived here for thousands of years? We might well celebrate this city and its many virtues, its heroes and heroines, its achievements and attributes, indeed Vegemite and the AFL, but not on the 30th of August, which is the day, because no one will be aware of this, that the Enterprise first sailed up the Birrarung with 6 unlawful settlers and, to quote an early Melbourne historian, commenced the, quote, white foundation of the colony.
All right, thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Philip Leilou.
I think you were always expecting my response on that one. I think we, as elected councillors at the City of Melbourne, represent Melbourne. And I think at any point that none of us ever feel that we don't ever want to celebrate or want to be part of Melbourne, that is also at their own discretion. I can certainly say from representing some of people, my constituents, that is definitely not the case. And I, for one, I can't speak for the others, but I'll just speak for myself. And I would say even those who have supported or voted for me would probably share the same viewpoint, because otherwise that's how they would show their support. And so I think it's, yes, I do acknowledge that there are what's done in the past in history, and we have done a lot in this council to actually showcase that and remember that and all the other things. But we can live in the past, or we can also move forward. So are we going to also then say, to, I guess, Councillor Ball's point, the white colonisation of Melbourne? So does that mean we can also then say the European, Italian, Greek colonisation of Melbourne, who have contributed? Are we also going to talk about the Asian colonisation of Melbourne, which made this city? Multiculturalism has made Melbourne what it is, and we celebrate certain days and events and many other things. But we, as elected councillors and officials of City of Melbourne, should be celebrating our own day. Obviously, Australia Day is completely out of our own hands because it's a federal thing, and until the federal government decide on a new date, Australia Day, January 26th, is the day that we celebrate, and we follow. And we should follow the federal government in recognising that. The Prime Minister and the Governor and others take very hardly on that. And yet we decide we don't want to celebrate our own. It's quite disheartening. And I think we need to give our constituents to that position. I do recognise, Councillor Balls, that in previous council that council has made a position that we don't support it, and management has acted upon that. And it's a policy and it's a position. I intend to change that. I don't think, and I think then that's a time when we will be able to see who actually supports Melbourne Day and who actually don't. You are more than welcome to, but I'll be saying it's a bit disheartening to say if you're representing Melbourne, but then you don't want to actually celebrate Melbourne. That just doesn't make sense. And $10,000 is actually a very small amount given that we give so much more money to many others, committees and events and everything. And so I will be saying it is time for change here at City of Melbourne. It is time that we recognise what we want to celebrate. We acknowledge the pain and suffering. Of course we do, right? But let's move forward. Let's actually talk about how do we bring people together, and how do we actually celebrate Melbourne in a way that it is in this context and not in the context of the previously. If we're going to talk about all the other things in the past, Melbourne doesn't exist. Why don't we just dissolve Melbourne? Why do we even have Melbourne? So I don't agree with that particular fact, and I want to celebrate Melbourne. I welcome any other councillors to vote for Melbourne. And I welcome anybody else who don't want to vote for Melbourne. It is within their choice, but just knowing that if you're not voting positively to this, you are essentially voting against Melbourne. And so I ask the question then, are you really here to support Melbourne?
All right, thank you, Councillor Leilu. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? No. In that case, I will put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Rees, Councillor Scott, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Louis, Councillor Camilla, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Guest. All those against? Councillor Ball, Councillor Griffiths, all those abstaining, Councillor Rouse. That motion is carried. All right, that concludes the items of general business. We now move on to agenda item 8, urgent business. I don't believe there are any items of urgent business. Agenda item 9, closure of the open meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion which is displayed on the screen. There it is. To close the meeting to the public to consider items of confidential business. I'm happy to move that motion. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance, and declare the open meeting closed to the public at 6:41 p.m. Thank you, one and all.